There was a news story today about China landing a probe on the far side of the moon. Yes, they really did it. This event is part of what some people are calling a kind of space race or even a quiet space war between China and the United States. Imagine this: America claims a part of the moon, then China lands a probe and plants a flag there, and suddenly the US says, "Hey, that's our spot." Conflicts like that could actually happen, especially if there are valuable resources on the moon that can be mined. I looked into a mission called Clementine years ago. It was a top-secret US military and NASA mission. They sent a satellite into orbit around the moon, specifically to explore the far side. The mission was called Clementine, and as soon as I heard that name, I had a feeling it wasn't coming back. Sure enough, after going to the far side of the moon, the satellite hit something and never returned. That's why I remembered the song lyrics. "Oh my darling Clementine, you were lost and gone forever." It turns out I was right. But before it disappeared, Clementine sent back around 20 gigabytes of data, including images that have since been made public. These pictures were taken before the age of Photoshop or digital editing. Some of them show strange shapes and objects that look like broken machines or structures that don't seem natural. It seemed like a scouting mission to gather information, and I believe that's also why China is so interested in the far side of the moon. It's not just about science, it's about finding ancient technology, learning how it works, and possibly turning it into powerful tools or weapons. One of the most interesting conspiracy theories says that between 1969 and 1972, NASA sent astronauts on 7 missions to the moon. 6 were successful. Apollo 13 was the one that had to return early due to problems. But here's the strange part. That was the only time in history when humans went more than 400 miles from Earth. Since then, every space mission, whether it's the Space Shuttle or the International Space Station, has stayed in low Earth orbit. Back then, astronauts traveled about 260,000 miles out to the moon and back. That's deep space. But we had never even sent a test animal that far to see what would happen. They just did it. Today, we still mostly send unmanned spacecraft like the ones we have on Mars. We've never sent living beings through the Van Allen radiation belts into deep space to see if they could survive. Between solar flares and other dangers, anything could have gone wrong. When you look at the photos from the moon, some of the structures seem unusual, like domes or even pyramids. One of the astronauts, possibly Neil Armstrong, mentioned something odd in the audio recordings from the black box, which are now available to the public through the Freedom of Information Act. He said something like, "Look at those convex structures down there. I bet the people in there never get out." It sounded like he was describing domes on the surface of the moon. That statement is recorded in NASA's official transcripts and audio files. In one of the declassified images, you can clearly see a structure that looks like a pyramid. It's in the upper right-hand corner. If you clean up the image, it becomes more visible. It has flat sides and a pointed top, just like a man-made pyramid. That shape doesn't really fit with natural formations. We're not saying we know what these things are, but they definitely don't seem like they belong there. This pyramid has been seen in moon images for years. It's been studied and shared many times. And it raises big questions. What is our government's connection to these structures? Is there a history or relationship? It looks like there might be, and if that's true, it forces us to wonder about the purpose of keeping that information hidden. Some people have been harmed by these unidentified objects. That's a fact, and it's being dealt with in court cases. Some victims are US military personnel, and their injuries are being processed through the Department of Veterans Affairs. These aren't wild guesses, these are documented cases. While it's not millions of people, some have been seriously injured or even killed. These objects, whatever they are, don't behave like anything we understand. They seem to operate outside the laws of nature. That's what makes them so concerning. We don't fully understand what kind of energy they emit, but it's dangerous. One person who has studied this closely is Dr. Gary Nolan, a professor from Stanford Medical School. He's an expert in brain injuries and has worked on these cases for over 10 years. He's very well respected. He's even developed patents and is financially independent. He flew out to a remote location at his own expense just to share what he had learned. He has no reason to lie or exaggerate. Dr. Nolan has been analyzing the injuries suffered by U.S. service members who were in close contact with these unidentified objects. According to him, these objects emit a type of energy that disrupts brain function or can even cause death. It's not normal radiation, but something unknown. His research is serious, scientific, and ongoing. The truth is, we don't fully understand what's out there. But the evidence shows that something strange is happening, and people have paid the price for getting too close. That alone should make us all stop and think about what's really going on beyond our planet. According to what was told to me, people have actually died because of encounters with strange objects or forces, and that's a serious point to think about. One interesting story comes from the Apollo missions. When the Apollo 11 spacecraft took off from the moon, scientists noticed something odd. They thought the moon might be hollow. It seemed like the surface of the moon was denser than its inner layers. That's the opposite of how it works on Earth. Normally, the deeper you go, the denser the material becomes. But on the moon, the data showed the opposite, which is similar to how an excavation site would look, like something had been dug out from the inside. To investigate this idea further, during the Apollo 12 mission, NASA deliberately crashed a part of the spacecraft, the booster stage, into the surface of the moon. They had already placed seismometers there to measure vibrations. When the booster hit, the moon rang like a bell, meaning it vibrated for a surprisingly long time, which supports the strange idea that the moon might not be solid all the way through. This isn't a rumor, it's a real, documented fact. You might recall an episode with Randall Carlson where the idea came up that the moon was placed where it is to help stabilize Earth's atmosphere. It sounds wild, but there are theories suggesting that the moon's perfect size and position are too unusual to be just a coincidence. Then there's the story of Ingo Swann, a psychic who worked in a government program called Stargate, which studied remote viewing, the supposed ability to mentally see distant places. He wrote a book called Penetration, where he claimed he was taken by a mysterious man named Axelrod, someone who seemed like a secret agent. This man asked him to remote view the moon. In his vision, Swann said he saw an alien base on the moon. The story gets even stranger. He later said he met a woman in a grocery store who gave off the feeling of being an alien in disguise. While it sounds unbelievable, multiple people involved in the Stargate program also claim to have seen structures on the far side of the moon using remote viewing. There's another story that came up in a discussion with AJ from the Y-Files. He mentioned that someone had seen photographs of structures on the far side of the moon. These photos were supposed to be released to the public, and people thought it would be huge news. But they were never released. That might have been a reference to Carl Wolf, who claimed he was shown classified photos of the moon while working with the U.S. Air Force. He said those photos showed buildings or structures, but later he died in a strange bicycle accident. Whether you believe the claims or not, the timing and secrecy raise many questions. It makes people ask, why would the government hide this information? If American citizens have been harmed or even killed, why cover that up? One possibility is that the government doesn't fully understand what's going on either. Maybe whatever they're dealing with is so advanced that they're still trying to figure it out. If these are beings from another planet, or from another dimension, would they even care who the president is or what government is in charge? Probably not. If they look at humans as violent, territorial creatures who've developed nuclear weapons, they might think we're too primitive to bother with directly. A lot of people use a science fiction lens to understand these things, imagining aliens from space with advanced technology. But historically, almost every culture has looked at these kinds of mysteries through a spiritual or religious lens instead. People used to believe in a supernatural world that was always interacting with us. Every ancient society had some version of this belief, that there are unseen forces, both good and bad, influencing the world. That view was widely accepted until around August 1945, when the United States dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Since then, Western culture has become mostly secular, meaning many people now believe only in science and technology. We've started acting like humans are the highest power in the universe. But that modern view is actually rare and very recent. For most of human history, People believed in a spiritual world affecting their lives. When you go back and look at ancient carvings or cave drawings, like the ones showing figures with bird heads or wearing masks, it starts to look less like mythology and more like a visual record of encounters with something strange. For example, the ancient Anunnaki are often shown with eagle-like heads. Some believe those aren't literal heads but helmets for breathing, like what astronauts wear. Ancient stories even talk about them traveling to the moon and Mars. Other cave drawings show people with large bubble-like helmets, similar to what a modern astronaut would wear. It's fascinating to think about. Imagine you're a prehistoric human just trying to survive, hunting animals and making fire, and then you witness something so incredible that you stop everything to draw it on a cave wall. What did they see that made them do that? These mysteries, whether seen as science, conspiracy, or spirituality, have been with us for a long time. And even today, we're still trying to understand what it all means. Many people wonder why we haven't gone back to the moon since the original missions in the late 1960s and early 70s. Given how much more advanced our technology is today compared to 1969, it seems like we should have done it by now. And it's true, our technology has improved a lot, especially in computers, data processing, and engineering. However, that advanced technology hasn't been fully applied to sending humans into deep space again. One of the biggest reasons is funding. Space missions, especially those involving humans, are extremely expensive. There has to be a clear reason to spend that kind of money, and for many years, governments haven't seen enough benefit in going back to the moon. Instead, space agencies have focused more on sending robotic missions, which are cheaper and much safer. For example, we've sent multiple rovers to Mars, which have sent back high-resolution images, run experiments, and searched for signs of life, all without risking human lives. Between 1969 and 1972, during the Apollo program, astronauts actually went to the moon, but the technology they used back then is considered primitive by today's standards. The computers on those spacecraft were much less powerful than the smartphones we use now. And yet, they pulled it off. That fact has led some people to question whether all the footage and images from those missions were real. While there's no definitive proof that it was faked, there's also a theory that some of the content, whether photos or videos, might have been altered or staged for public consumption. The idea is that if you mix some truth with false information and release it all together, it becomes harder for people to know what to believe. That confusion can make the entire topic seem less credible and discourage serious investigation. Before Chang'e 5 arrived, scientists could only look at this region using photos from orbiting spacecraft. Those photos showed signs of lava flows and strange rock formations, but no one had ever landed there to take samples. The hope was that by studying this spot directly, they could learn more about how the moon formed, especially its volcanic history. Another reason this landing was impressive is because of its location on the far side of the moon, the side we can't see from Earth. Most earlier missions landed on the near side, where it's easier to send signals back and forth. Landing on the far side meant China had to use advanced satellite technology to communicate with the spacecraft. Despite these challenges, the Chang'e 5 mission succeeded. The lander drilled deeper than any spacecraft had in decades, searching for signs of water, volcanic rock layers, and strange crystals that might reveal secrets about the moon's past. These findings could even help us understand more about Earth and how the solar system developed. All in all, this mission was not just about reaching the moon, it was about unlocking its mysteries and pushing human knowledge even further. Scientists find this area of the moon especially fascinating because it is largely unexplored and very old. The rocks collected from this region are believed to be about 1 billion years older than those collected during the Apollo missions. This makes the findings very important, as they could offer new insights into how the moon was formed. Experts are hopeful that by studying this location, they will learn more about major events in the moon's history, such as meteor impacts, periods of volcanic activity, and how the moon's outer layer, or crust, was formed. These new discoveries from such an unusual and untouched part of the lunar surface have greatly improved China's status in space exploration and excited scientists around the world. It also reminds us that the moon still holds many secrets waiting to be discovered. One of the most important parts of the Chang'e 5 mission was collecting deep samples from the moon. This was a major breakthrough because earlier missions mostly picked up dust and small rocks from the surface. In contrast, Chang'e 5 drilled much deeper, reaching layers of the moon that likely hadn't been exposed in billions of years. Scientists hoped these deeper samples would either support existing theories or provide new clues about how the moon came to be. Shortly after landing in Oceanus Procellarum, a large flat area on the far side of the moon, the lander began drilling. Unlike earlier missions that only scraped the surface, this spacecraft had special tools that dug into deeper layers. These underground layers could include signs of past volcanic activity, evidence of meteor impacts, and even details about how the moon cooled over time. There was also hope that the samples would reveal water or minerals that had never been seen before. Collecting the samples was only part of the challenge. The lander had a small section, called an ascent module, which launched from the moon's surface once drilling was finished. It met back up with the orbiting spacecraft and transferred the rock samples before returning to Earth. The whole mission had to be completed in just 14 Earth days, because the environment on the moon is harsh, with extreme temperatures and strong radiation. When the samples returned to Earth on December 17, 2020, scientists all over the world were eager to study them. Some researchers believe the moon was formed when a Mars-sized object hit the Earth more than 4 billion years ago. That collision would have sent hot debris into space, which later cooled and formed the moon. If this theory is true, the deep samples might show signs of intense heat or chemical clues that connect the moon to Earth. But if the samples turn out to be very different, that could change how we think the moon was created. Thanks to Chang'e 5's deep drilling, scientists now have a chance to study untouched material from the moon's hidden layers. This mission proved that digging deep into the moon's surface is not only possible but also incredibly valuable. It opens the door to even more daring missions in the future, and maybe even one day, humans could dig into the moon themselves to discover its deepest secrets. The ancient rocks collected by Chang'e 5 amazed scientists everywhere. These rocks are extremely old, possibly a billion years older than the ones brought back by the Apollo astronauts. Because of their age, they're very valuable to science. By drilling deeper than ever before, the Chang'e 5 mission reached material that had stayed buried for billions of years. These old rocks tell the story of how the moon changed over time. A popular theory says that the moon was created when a massive planet collided with Earth, throwing debris into space. That debris became the moon. Scientists once thought that most of the water and light elements would have burned away during that violent event. But the samples from Chang'e 5 challenge that idea. They suggest that the moon may still contain water and minerals, possibly delivered by comets, asteroids, or meteorites crashing into its surface. Over time, these impacts would have heated the moon's surface, melting parts of it and forming small glass beads. Water from solar winds or other sources may have gotten trapped inside these beads. When the Chang'e 5 lander dug below the surface, it found these glass beads and brought them back. Although each bead contains only a tiny bit of water, scientists believe there are so many of them across the moon that they might represent a large amount of hidden water overall. Even more exciting were the crystals found in the samples. One study described a new phosphate mineral never seen before. This mineral may contain elements useful for nuclear fusion. Although scientists are not yet sure what this means for practical use, the discovery has sparked excitement. Nuclear fusion could provide huge amounts of clean energy with little harmful waste, much better than the nuclear fission we use today. Because these ancient lunar rocks are so old, they carry the history of cosmic events. They show signs of meteor strikes, volcanoes, and rare elements like helium-3. Continued research on these rocks could help us understand how the moon has changed, and might even help us solve energy problems here on Earth. One of the biggest surprises from the Chang'e 5 mission was the discovery of water inside tiny impact-formed glass beads. Until recently, most scientists thought the moon was completely dry, especially since it has very little atmosphere and went through extreme heat during its formation. Scientists find this area of the moon very special because much of it is still unexplored and very old. Some rocks from this region are believed to be about 1 billion years older than the ones brought back by the Apollo missions. This makes it a valuable place to study if we want to learn more about how the moon was formed. Experts believe that by examining this area, called Oceanus Procellarum, we can better understand big events in the moon's history, like volcanic eruptions, meteor impacts, and how its outer layer, or crust, was created. The discoveries made here have not only pushed China's space program forward, but have also excited scientists all around the world. It shows that the moon still has many mysteries to reveal. A big part of China's Chang'e 5 mission was collecting samples from deeper under the moon's surface than ever before. Earlier missions only collected surface dust or shallow rocks, but Chang'e 5 drilled deep into the lunar ground. This was a bold move that could help scientists find older and more diverse materials. They hoped these deep samples would support or challenge current theories about how the moon came to be. When the lander touched down on Oceanus Procellarum, it started drilling right away. Unlike previous missions that just scooped up loose soil, Chang'e 5 used tools that could reach rock layers that hadn't been touched in billions of years. These layers could provide clues about ancient volcanoes, meteor crashes, and how the moon cooled down over time. Scientists also hoped to find signs of water or minerals in these deep samples. Once the samples were collected, they were loaded into a small rocket on the lander and sent back to an orbiting spacecraft, which then brought them home to Earth. The mission had to be completed in just 14 days because of the harsh lunar environment, which includes extreme temperature changes and radiation. The samples returned to Earth on December 17, 2020, and researchers everywhere were eager to study them. They hoped the rocks would offer clues about how the moon and Earth were formed, possibly from a giant collision with another planet billions of years ago. If that theory is right, the rocks might show signs of extreme heat or chemical traits that match Earth. If they don't, it could mean we have to rethink the moon's origin story. Thanks to these new samples, scientists have a chance to study lunar material that has never been touched before. It proved that digging below the surface is possible and very helpful, opening the door for future missions, and maybe even people, to explore more deeply and learn the moon's secrets. The material collected is especially valuable because it's believed to be around 1 billion years older than what the Apollo missions gathered. That makes it a rare scientific treasure. These ancient materials help tell the story of the moon's formation and its changes over billions of years. A popular theory says the moon was formed when a planet-sized object hit Earth and sent debris into space, which later formed the moon. But this theory also suggested that most of the water and light elements would have been lost due to the extreme heat. The new samples challenge that idea. They show there might still be surprising amounts of water and minerals on the moon. Some of these could have formed through repeated impacts from comets and asteroids that hit the surface and melted the rock into tiny glass beads. Over time, water molecules, possibly from solar wind or other sources, got trapped inside those beads. When Chang'e 5 drilled into the ground, it brought these glass beads back for study. Each bead contains only a tiny bit of water, but there are so many of them that they may represent a large reservoir. Other crystals found in the samples are just as exciting.